Potential assessment is a learning opportunity for all participants in the special role of HR experts.
Most of potential assessment procedures commonly used today promise an objective culling of capabilities, attitudes, and metacompetences. In so doing, they methodically, sometimes perhaps even deliberately, overlook the fact that tests can always be manipulated and falsified, or at least so dishonestly completed. In consequence to this growing phenomenon of manipulative practice of participants, decision-makers are confronted with results that actually not provide a valid information. This development has led to a broad discussion about potential sources of error, Lang von Wins, Triebel, Buchner, and Sandor, 2008. The authors suggest not relying on test procedures alone, but rather actively training the diagnostic competence. Potential assessment must therefore create a dialogue situation which can provide more information. The best information here is the evaluation of the results of the assessment itself, since in this delicate situation the competence of the participant actualizes itself in dialogue among the participant, the HR expert and the decision maker. This makes clear what a central role the HR expert plays. If he steps primarily into a judging position, he constructs a social reality in which the candidate behaves as if he is being judged. One will be more cooperative, another somewhat more resistant. The underlying assumption is the observed data are indicators for the candidate's usual behavior. In the planning of potential assessment consultancy, two basic approaches can be differentiated. The first is the idea of assessment by an external party. Like a consultant, the candidate is put through various tests and an interview is conducted. Thereafter an assessment, that is, a judgment is presented to the decision maker. The second is the concept of potential assessment as development instrument, in which the HR expert or consultant, the candidate and the leader engage in a dialogue to discuss together the business activities and the competences needed for them, and to reflect on their own strengths and weaknesses as well as how the organization and the person could develop together. When the organization conceives of potential assessment as an external process, it is logical for a candidate to present him or herself in as ideal a light as possible, after which an open, honest dialogue becomes irrelevant, especially when the candidate neither sees the consultant's final report nor is told, "You have potential in 3 of our required dimensions but not in 2 others." On the other hand, if potential assessment is viewed as a development step, the process must be designed so that the candidate can study both him or herself and the situation and understand the idiosyncrasies of both. This involves a consulting service, usually a workshop with the candidate, ideally preceded by a conversation during which the candidate learns what the consulting service is about and what will happen, and during which the candidate is asked if he or she is willing to participate in order to learn more about him or herself. However, this is not intended as a diagnostic judgment over a person, but as the understanding of 1. Working processes, partial roles and the demands associated with them, 2. The candidate's own strengths and weaknesses, and 3. How well these two have the potential to function well together for the benefit of the whole organization. This means that the key point is mutual understanding of what is important for the organization and thus what is important for the position, what the candidate can contribute, and where the opportunities and risks lie. Together the HR expert and the candidate investigate the situation and try to reach a 12-good decision. Instead of a process of deception in which the parties show only their best sides, often followed by a rude awakening, in this system a serious dialogue between the person and the organization has already begun in the recruiting stage. During the decision process, the HR expert is advised to bear in mind that, whether internally or externally located, the expert does not play the role of a whisperer, a shadowy figure influencing personnel decisions, but rather essentially concentrates on supporting the decision-making process. The central task is thus the shaping and containing of a working structure for the communicative handling of demands, expectations, and evaluations among the parties involved. In summary, the specific process of an organizational development perspective and potential assessment incorporates for HR professionals, consultation with the person whose potential is being assessed, in order to reach an appropriate understanding of his or her capabilities and attitudes in relation to the requirements of the function and the complete relevant context within the organization, consulting the decision maker about an appropriate design for the function. How can the organizational design of the organization be translated into the design of a role? Consultation with both parties on questions of strategic fit, opportunities, risks and areas for development.